This time we will look at the average egogram of people with high AC. Here, a high AC score means that the person's AC score is within the top 10% among all test participants. The total number of participants is 8,255. Among them, 1,093 people are in this group, and the ratio is 13.2%. The standard is the top 10% in AC. When we look at the average scores of their 6 ego states, CPE is 32.7, NP is 37.4, A is 32.0, FC is 31.4, AC is 42.2, and SC is 31.1. Compared with the overall average, C is 7.9 points higher than the overall average of 34.3. So the first thing that stands out in this table is, of course, AC. This group has a force that first checks the other person, the atmosphere risks, and the safety line of the relationship before acting. That force stands very far at the front. The second thing we need to see is NP. NP is 37.4, which is higher than the overall average. Because of this, this group is not simply a group of cautious people. A flow of adjusting to the other person, trying not to make the other person uncomfortable, and trying not to harm the relationship can appear together. However, CP, A, FC, and SC are similar to the overall average or only slightly higher. Because the gap from AC is large, they are difficult to see clearly in ordinary relationships. In other words, this group has a structure where AC almost represents the scene, and NP makes that cautiousness look like consideration. When we look at people with high AC, the first point to remember is this. These are people who first adjust and later check their own mind. AC is the force that takes care of compliance, cautiousness, reading the atmosphere, self-restraint, and relationship adaptation inside the mind. So when AC is high, these questions are likely to come up first when the person looks at a scene. Is it all right to say this? Will the other person feel uncomfortable? Will I break the atmosphere for no reason? If I endure it, can this pass? Is it safer to adjust right now? These people check first before acting. They look at the other person's facial expression before speaking. They check the atmosphere before bringing out their own opinion. Even when they feel discomfort, they may swallow it once rather than show it immediately. Because of this, in ordinary relationships, they are often seen as cautious people, considerate people, easygoing people, good people, and people who adjust to the other person. However, it is not enough to see this structure simply as a good person. In this group, AC stands overwhelmingly at the front. In most relationship scenes, what is seen first is adjustment and restraint. Together with this, NP is also high. So this adjustment may appear not only as self-protection, but also as consideration that tries not to make the other person uncomfortable. Will the other person be hurt if I say this? I should keep the atmosphere from becoming awkward. I should speak slowly so the other person does not feel burdened. If I just endure a little, it will be all right. This kind of flow may appear. Because of this, people around them may call this person good. However, this goodness does not always work in a good direction for the person. From the other person's position, this person may look like someone who does not easily refuse requests, adjust even when uncomfortable, and speaks their own standards late. So when the relationship is not healthy, this structure can easily flow toward being used. This point is important. A person with high AC is not someone who has no mind inside. Rather, several ego states may move inside. When CP rises inside, the person may feel this way. That does not seem right. This seems to have crossed the line. Isn't this something that should not be done? However, the person may not say it immediately. When A rises inside, the person may judge this way. This is inefficient. If we do it this way, a problem may appear later. This choice has a large loss. However, outside, the person may pass over it quietly. When FC rises, emotion also appears. I also want to do it. It looks fun. I do not like it. I feel frustrated. However, the person may not express it immediately. When SC rises, personal needs may also exist. I want to do it differently. This way fits me better. I want to live this way. However, because the person first looks at the other person and the situation, they may push it behind. So to say this structure accurately, it is not that the other ego states are absent. It is a structure where those inner movements are not shown outside even when they arise. These people are closer to people who swallow inside than people who burst out immediately on the spot. Even when standards rise, they may not speak. Even when emotion rises, they may not express it. Even when they have personal needs, they may push them behind. Because of this, they may look quiet and easygoing outside, but inside, unspoken discomfort and fatigue can accumulate. In everyday terms, a flow close to Hwabyong can easily appear. It is a way of swallowing inward rather than bursting outward. And even while saying that it is all right, discomfort continues to accumulate inside. This type may not be someone who refuses strongly from the beginning, but someone who endures and endures, and then turns away at some point. The other person may feel this way. Why are you saying this now? You said it was all right then. Did your mind suddenly change? However, inside this person, it may not be sudden. It is highly possible that discomfort has already been accumulating from a long time ago. At first, the person adjusts. First, the person endures. The person watches the atmosphere. The person regulates so the other person is not uncomfortable. Then at some point, the person may say this. Actually, I felt a little uncomfortable then. I kept adjusting all along. When I said it was all right, it did not mean I was really all right. I endured it because I thought the atmosphere would become strange if I said it then. I cannot do this anymore. The greatest difficulty in this structure is that the person's own mind comes out too late. The person may have endured in order to protect the relationship. However, the other person may not have known that mind during that time. The person may feel that they were considerate. However, as time passes, that consideration can turn into disappointment. The person may feel that they acted kindly. However, if that kindness is repeated, the person's own limits can disappear. So the tuning needed for a person with high AC is not to become unconditionally brave. It is also not to burst out strongly. What matters is to speak small discomfort in time. This is a little difficult right now. I feel uncomfortable with this part. I said it was all right, but actually it feels a little burdensome. This time it is difficult for me to adjust. I will think about it a little and answer. This is beyond the range I can handle. These sentences are not words for breaking the relationship. Rather, they are safety devices that help the relationship endure longer. To summarize, people with high AC are not simply cautious people. They are people who first look at the other person and the atmosphere and push their own mind behind. Because NP is also high, that appearance can look like consideration and goodness. However, if that goodness is repeated, discomfort and fatigue can accumulate inside. So when we understand these people, it is better to look at them this way. We should look not at what they cannot say, but at what they have been swallowing for too long. A person with high ACE may show the energy of cautiousness and restraint not only in words but also in the body. However, non-verbal expressions are not a judgment table. We cannot look at one body gesture and say, this person has high AC. Non-verbal expressions are only reference material. When facial expression, posture, gaze, tone of voice, and distance repeatedly show the same direction, we can carefully estimate which ego state is standing at the front inside that person. A flow that can often be seen in a person with high AC is a direction where the person checks risk signals and the other person's response before emotion. Moderate tension may remain in the posture, the body may not be overly relaxed, and the movements may not be large. In an unfamiliar situation, the body may seem to move slightly backward. This kind of posture can give the feeling, let me watch first. Facial expression changes may not be large. Even when surprised or uncomfortable, the person may first check the situation rather than show it largely right away. Even when smiling, the smile may look like a smile that adjusts to the atmosphere rather than a fully relaxed smile. The gaze may move toward checking the other person's facial expression and the surrounding atmosphere together, rather than staying fixed on one person for a long time. Before speaking, the person may first look at what state the other person is in. The movements of the hands and arms may be restrained. The person may keep the hands close to the body or may hold objects carefully. There may be few unnecessary hand gestures, and each action may unfold carefully. The tone of voice may have many cushioning words. Perhaps, if it is all right, for now, in my opinion, if it is not uncomfortable, these expressions may not be simple speaking habits. They may be a flow that tries to check the other person's response and the safety of the relationship before speaking. The person may prefer expressions that leave room rather than push forward firmly. Because of this, even in the way the person speaks, more than in the content of the words, an attitude of trying to reduce risk can already be felt. The way the person uses space is also relatively cautious. The person may carefully maintain distance from others. The person may adapt slowly to a new space or relationship. In a gathering, the person may prefer a position where they can observe the whole situation rather than the center. This is not because the person has weak presence. It may be a way of first seeing, learning, and checking safety. However, these non-verbal expressions should not be concluded one by one. Less movement may be because the person is tired. Little facial expression may be an original habit. Keeping distance may also be a simple tendency. So non-verbal expressions must always be seen together with context, repetition, and combination. To summarize, the non-verbal expressions of AC are not discouraged gestures. They are closer to the direction of the body that tries to reduce mistakes, avoid making the other person uncomfortable, and avoid risk. The person may feel that they are only being cautious. However, people around them may receive it as frustrating, hard to read, or overly adjusting. The issue is not whether cautiousness exists or does not exist. It is important to see whether that cautiousness is being used as a force that protects the situation, or whether it is pressing the person's own mind down for too long. So a helpful question for a person with high AC is this: am I being considerate right now, or am I swallowing it? Now, for comparison, let's also look at the average of people with low AC. Here, a low AC score means that the person's AC score is within the bottom 10% among all test participants. The total number of participants is 8,255. The number in this group is 835, and the ratio is 10.1%. The standard is the bottom 10% in AC. When we look at the average scores of their 6 ego states, CP is 31.3, NP is 30.0, A is 29.1, FC is 31.4, AC is 25.9, and SC is 30.5. Compared with the overall average, AC is 8.4 points lower than the overall average of 34.3. This group is a group of people with low AC. However, looking only at low, AC is not enough. The more important feature in this group is that the other 5 ego states are gathered at similar heights. CP, NP, A, FC, and SC are all gathered between the 29-point range and the 31-point range. Because of this, it is difficult to say that one specific ego state leads the scene steadily. In some scenes, the person may respond immediately like FC. In some scenes, the person may speak standards like CP. In some scenes, the person may show their own way like SC. In some scenes, the person may judge briefly like A. In other scenes, the person may try to take care of the other person like N and P. Because of this, people around them may feel that this person is a little difficult to predict. However, the scores of these 5 ego states are not very high. Most are similar to the overall average or lower than the average. So rather than unpredictability that gives strong pressure, it is more likely to appear as responses that change a little depending on the situation. In this group, what can form some characteristic is FC and SC. Both are only slightly higher than the overall average. Because of this, the person may feel this way about themselves. I am quite honest. I have my own way. I do not watch others that much. I tend to do what I want to do. However, the actual scores are not very high. Because of this, these qualities may not be delivered to people around them as clearly as the person feels. The person may feel, I expressed myself quite honestly. However, the other person may feel, their responses do change sometimes, but I do not really know a very clear color. The person may feel, I have my own way. However, the other person may receive them as not someone with a very strong personal way, but someone who responds a little differently depending on the situation. Because of this, in this structure, there can be a gap between the way the person thinks of themselves and the way others actually feel them. Low AC means that cautiousness and restraint are weak. Because of this, responses may come out relatively immediately. However, that response may not be very strongly clear. This is because FC and SC are also only slightly higher than the average, and the other ego states are also in a similar range. Because of this, the person may feel free and honest, but people around them may feel this person is a little difficult to predict, but does not have a very strong color. The tuning point of this structure is not to kill speed. It is to check once how the other person will receive the response before responding. How will the other person hear this if I say it now? I spoke honestly, but will the other person feel it as sudden? Is what I feel as my way also being delivered clearly to the other person? Is now the time to respond immediately? Or the time to look once and then speak? These questions do not force AC to become higher. They are safety devices that raise the reliability of the response. To summarize, people with low AC may respond relatively immediately because cautiousness and restraint are weak. However, because the other ego states are gathered at similar heights, it may be difficult to predict which ego state will lead the scene. Still, because the overall scores are not high, this is more likely to be seen as a lack of response consistency than as a strong burden. In particular, the honesty and personal color that the person feels may not be delivered to others as clearly as the person feels them